was a time centuries ago when the rest of the world was governed by kings and emperors. But our founders had this radical idea. They would create a government by the people with a constitution that endures and protects us to this day.
Of the social contract, or that relationship between people and their government, is that it should be that of order, control, and security. And that individuals should give up their individual freedom to a supreme leader he called the Leviathan.
To understand political power, wrote Locke, it must be recognized that people are born with natural, God-given rights to life, liberty, and property.
Montesquieu advocated that the power of the government be divided into three main branches: the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. The intent of separation of powers is to prevent the concentration of power in the hands of one person or one group.
In bold language, the 47-page pamphlet went on to call for complete independence from Britain, arguing that it was common sense to stop following the royal brute.
Mary Wollstonecraft is most famous for writing A Vindication of the Rights of Women and being besties with Voltaire.
Common law, he argued, guarantees the sanctity of an Englishman's life, liberty, and property. These rights include due process of law, the attorney-client confidentiality, equality before the law, habeas corpus, the right to confront accusers, and forbidding bills of attainder and forced self-incrimination.
Known as the father of modern criminal justice, Beccaria inspired many nations to grant due process to the accused and end torture and capital punishment.
John Marshall was the fourth Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He came on to a court which lacked energy, weight, and dignity. Those were the words of the first Chief Justice, John Jay. But after Marshall was Chief Justice for 34 years, no one would ever say that again.
I think because originally the truth is that the Constitution does come from the Iroquois Confederacy. It does come, and the U.S. Congress acknowledged that not long ago, that it does indeed influenced by and you find out Franklin and Jefferson did go and spend at least 30 years before and learned the Mohawk jargon, the Mohegan jargon, all the Iroquois jargon of trade, and learned and sat with their councils and studied, and like, wow, these people had equality, men and women.
Forces against independence appeared to have the upper hand, Adams rose to his feet. Without notes and without any preparation, he made the case for independence. By the time he sat down, the case had been won.
Hamilton has sort of a mixed legacy, particularly as Secretary of the Treasury. On the one hand, he was a vital force for establishing national credit. He also was someone who was trying as hard as he could to empower the national government, not trying to necessarily create a monarchy, but he believed that the British monarchy was the finest government on the face of the earth. He was not shy about saying that.
The negotiations that ended the Revolutionary War occurred in Paris, and we were represented by the best team of diplomats we've ever had. Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, and John Jay. And of the three, Jay probably played the largest role. Jay, Franklin, and Adams negotiated for and obtained tremendously broad boundaries for the United States, both on the west and on the north. See,
When the new Constitution was finally agreed on, it did not have a Bill of Rights. George Mason saw this as a personal failure and refused to sign the Constitution. Instead, he went home and quit politics forever. 4 years later, they convinced Congress to add the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments. Written by James Madison, the Bill of Rights used much of the same language that Mason had proposed.
Uncollected debt seemed totally unavoidable under the British, and who could speak to that better than Adams, which he did very loudly, wherever he could to whoever would listen, inspiring Congress to join the American Revolution, and that was a huge success. So, even Samuel Adams had to try out a few different careers before finding what was best for him.
Washington crossing the Delaware, Jimmy is holding the flag. He negotiated with France to buy the Louisiana Purchase for Jefferson and served as Secretary of State for James Madison. By 1816, he was super qualified to be president. His presidency became known as the era of good feelings because America was feeling great. The War of 1812 was over, and everyone was feeling patriotic. Also, the Federalist Party collapsed, and Monroe and his Democratic-Republican Party buddies had only each other to argue with. Monroe was good at delegating power and worked closely with his cabinet to make decisions.
After, he was appointed and elected to many positions, most notably to the Continental Congress, where he signed the Declaration of Independence. Roger was the only person to sign the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Association, the Articles of Confederation, and the United States Constitution.
Madison was recruited by Alexander Hamilton and John Jay of New York to help promote its ratification. Together, they wrote the Federalist Papers, a series of 85 articles and essays. The Federalist Papers appeared in 3 newspapers and were written using the pen name Publius, a reference to the Roman Republic. Madison wrote roughly 1/3 of the 85 articles. In Federalist 10, Madison warned about factions or groups of citizens with interests that differ from the interests of the nation as a whole. Madison believed that a large republic is the best way to prevent factions. Voters in a large republic have a bigger pool of candidates to choose from, which increases the chance that a competent representative will be selected. To this day, Federalist 10 is considered one of the greatest pieces of American political writing. In Federalist 51, Madison laid out the framework for the system of checks and balances which allowed each of the 3 branches of the federal government to check the power of one another.
I just kind of marvel over the fact that we are still using this same set of laws 200 plus years later.
That document remains the framework that unites us today and provides the path forward.
They created it, they empowered us, but unless we rise to the occasion through democratic self-education and learning about the Constitution, then their great experiment will not survive. But they were optimistic that it would survive because they had faith in us. They had faith in the citizens, and they had faith in constitutional education.